Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a dramaturg, director, and playwright known for plays that merge the personal, the political, and the poetic. Her play, The Way North, was developed at the 2018 Seven Devils Playwrights Conference and was a finalist for the 2018 O'Neill National Playwrights Conference. Other plays include 2 Degree, 10 Mile Lake, Age of Bees, and This Floating World. She teaches creative writing at the Orange County School of the Arts and has also taught at Wesleyan University and the University of California-Irvine. She's back in town for a short spell for rehearsals for her play, The Body's Midnight, which opens April 27th at the Boston Court Theater in Pasadena, California. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tira Palmquist.
Well, good morning. Hello.
Good morning. Thank you. For those of us, or for you and I, we know. For those of you that are listening, we had a little bit of debacle. This almost didn't happen because I had a system crash. So we made it happen, and you're live in studio opposed to doing this remote because you head back to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
St. Paul, correct? Yes.
What's taking you there?
Well, my daughter and son-in-law live there. They had a baby 8 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So my husband and I got a condo. We bought a condo to have a second home nearer them so we can go and be grandparents, which is amazing.
Wonderful. That's awesome. That's great. So you've come here. You're in what stage of the rehearsal process are you in to come and join in on this?
We just finished our first 4 or 5 days of table work. And today is going to be the day we finally get up on our feet. So I've been here for this whole first stretch, which has been great. The cast is amazing. The crew is fantastic. So we've had a really great time just starting the exploration of the script.
Sure. How many days has that been so far that they've been doing the table work?
5 total. And so today we finally get up on our feet.
So walk me through table work, because that's one thing that we haven't explored on the channel yet. As far as, we've done certain rehearsal processes, just readings or like coming into, basic rehearsals. But what does it look like for table work? And then how do you fit into that dynamic?
Essentially, table work means, as Jessica Kubzansky would say, opening up the text.
Okay. All right.
So going through each scene very slowly, it doesn't need to take any particular pace, but it is stopping whenever there are questions, stopping when there's a discovery, stopping when the actors need to say, hold on, can we go back a minute? I'd like to go back and attack that differently. Sometimes the discussion around the table is simply clarifying, what day is it? Where are we? What's happening? Where have you come from? Those kinds of things.
When you say what day is it, are we talking what day is it in regards to the story, or are we talking in legitimate, like it's Monday and it's the, just for clarification, yeah.
No, it's in the script, especially in this play, because it's a road trip story and each scene might potentially be a different day. And not that the audience needs to know that in particular, but for the characters
100%,
in the scene.
100%.
How many days have you been on the road? How hungry are you? How tired are you? Etc.
How much is the person that you're with driving you nuts?
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the joys of doing that kind of really detailed table work is that before you get on your feet, at that point, you've already spent a lot of time with that kind of very methodical exploration emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, so that when you're finally on your feet, you're like, oh, right. I remember, I now have a clearer sense of what my goal is. What if there's any antagonism between me and the other character. And for me as a playwright, one of the great things is hearing the questions around the table. If people are utterly confused about a particular point, it might either be my job to cut, clarify, reframe so that future folks around the room who would not perhaps have the opportunity to have the playwright in the room, to be able to encounter that text and have that clarification already built in. It also is, of course, little things like, oops, yeah, I didn't mean that word. I meant this word instead.
Sure. Oh,
Or in the case of, like, this happened yesterday, I was listening to, all of the actors are amazing. So listening to an incredibly talented and gifted actor encounter a sentence and have to go back again and again. And for me as the playwright, listening to that, realizing I can help them out. Let me revise that so that it can come out of your mouth a little bit more mellifluously.
So in that regard, because there's a fine line between table work and table read, and I'm assuming that you've gone through a table read or two with this.
Sure.
So obviously there's certain things you're going to catch when you do those, and you're not going to catch everything when you're writing, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So, for that instance, was it just kind of brushed over that whoever might have been reading that role originally didn't have a problem with it, or was it just because you're not really fully in the moment that
it could have been either of those things, right? But also, every pass that you go through a script, you find new things, you make different discoveries, you encounter it in a different way because, it's funny that even though I have been working on this play for a couple of years, there's still things that's like, how long has that, little blemish been in the script that I didn't hear or see?
Sure.
And sometimes it's because other actors can be so good they can make your text sound better. Sometimes it's, maybe that person wasn't perfectly cast, and so I'm going to just put a pin in that and come back to it with another actor to see if they also have the same problem. So, yeah.
So what is the process or structure when it comes to this? Are you making a pass in the whole entire play for each day, and or are you saying, all right, for this day we're just going to go through the first 20 pages tonight, and then we'll go through the next 20 pages tomorrow, and so on until we get through the whole play, and then we'll go through, make a whole pass? Or what's the process or structure in that regard?
For table work, it really is taking the time to do the chunk that you can get through in however many hours you have. The first day when we were doing table work, we had actually done a lot of group building exercises, and so we only got through a few pages in whatever time we had left, but it was also extremely detailed world-building questions and conversations. So then the next day we were able to get through a much bigger chunk, the next day an even bigger chunk. And from my perspective as a playwright, even if we only worked on the first 5 pages, 10 pages, 15 pages, it may be that there was a question or two that came up in the room that I know impacts something on page 36, page 57 down the road. So I had a list of about 5 really key points that I wanted to make sure I addressed, having come out of that initial conversation, that I went through and I made some changes to set something up better, to put better underscoring under a particularly important point. So then when we finally encountered those pages, to hear them and say, yep, yeah, now we've got that question addressed.
Good.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. So what can you walk me through some of the exercises that you guys did prior that left you only enough time to do 5 pages for the first day?
We did a lot of literally games, but it was about getting to know each other, learning each other's names, learning each other's roles but also getting to a point of comfort and fun and joy in the room.
Sure.
So that when we're doing the harder work, nobody's feeling nervous, hesitant to speak. We have a intimacy coordinator coach working on the show. And she came in for one short exercise just to start to introduce the question of how we even have those conversations about intimacy and autonomy in a room without feeling like it has to be an antagonistic conversation.
Sure. Because I imagine, I mean, I don't know if this is a company where a lot of people have worked together before, but I can imagine that it's not a play about strangers. So
correct.
If you held auditions and nobody happened to know each other, you've got to build those relationships. So
Exactly.
I imagine that comes in handy.
Sure.
How much, where does the line draw when you're doing table work between the director and the playwright? Are there questions that really that conflict with where the director's vision are, that they're going to you about, that really should be for him, or there's questions that they're going to him about that should really be to you or her, to her,
right,
to you versus to you?
Ideally, as I like to say, everybody's arrows are pointing in the same direction. And so often it'll be a question to Jess, the director, that I realize may also be a question for me.
Sure.
But, then we talk afterwards, and sometimes a question that has been posed to me as a playwright, Jess knows, no, this is a question for a director. This is how we shape it. This is how, we attack a scene, etc. So in an ideal world, you and the director and the dramaturg are all sharing those conversations post-rehearsal about, well, how do we answer this question, or how do we clarify this? And so it really depends on the question, frankly.
Sure. I bring it up because I have had, with some of the festivals that I've done, where the playwright's available, but sometimes the playwright will be working on scenes from me directing, and they'll go to the playwright and they're like, "That's just go back to the director. Ask James. That's his thing."
Sure.
Because what I found, and maybe you can tell me if you've ever gotten into this point where you get into that flow state where you don't even know why that's there. What the character's intention is, like, this is just where this is the direction it went. So does that happen frequently with you, or do you find those things occurring?
No, it does sometimes happen. I was having dinner with a playwright director friend of mine, and we were talking about the mystery that is writing, that sometimes you will write things that you're not entirely sure where exactly it came from. You discover it in the moment, and then 5 weeks later, you're like, oh, right, I wrote that. I was really smart at that point. My past me was great. How amazing that I put that little Easter egg in the script that I didn't know I was doing. But, I will make discoveries about the script throughout the process. And if you're not doing that as a playwright, I don't feel like you're being really true to your own work.
Sure.
That when I think about writing and my initial idea for the play, it kind of feels a little bit like driving through fog. When you can maybe see the edges of the road, you can't really see you can't see very far ahead of you. And you just keep trusting that you're on the right road.
Sure.
And then eventually the fog clears a little bit and you're like, right. This is where I am. And that's oh, look, there's a house over there, etc. And so as you keep driving down the road of your own play, that fog keeps lifting, and maybe you have a clear idea of the destination, or maybe you only have a clearer idea of the right path to be on, but you can't know everything the first time,
Sure.
your first draft. So
yeah, well, and I think that's a thing, because I don't know if actors realize that not everything written do we know the intention of what the character is. The character did this, but we may not necessarily know why.
Right.
That character made the choices, and I guess that sometimes maybe it comes from a place of fear that I don't want to give the wrong answers to why they're doing this.
Sure.
But I don't know if it I think that's the whole point of acting, isn't it? It's like making a choice that,
Yes.
yeah.
And making discoveries and finding your way into the character. And as a playwright, I'm certainly doing that too. I was an actor before I was a playwright, and I'm trying to the best of my ability as a not so great actor to fill it for myself, to feel it from the inside about wait. So this is a critical moment, and what's going on in the body, what's going on in the brain, how fast is the heartbeat going? What are the choices about, do we lash out or not, or cry, or, and it's not that I'm trying to direct a future actor's performance. I'm trying to find that particular landscape of the scene that feels true and unfolds in a way that there's a kind of verisimilitude.
That's embarrassing. That's my phone. I thought I turned the ringer off. I'm so sorry.
We're getting very spooky about playwriting right now. But I feel like that
Apologies, yes.
probably answers that.
Yeah, I had this on just in case you called when you got here, and then I forgot to turn it off. So anyways, have you done table work? Have you always done table work, or have you just jumped into rehearsals and ran?
I haven't always done table work because not every director can see the value of it.
Sure. Do you recommend it though for every?
Yeah, I love it. The longer you spend doing really good table work, the easier it is once you get on your feet. I know that there are directors that begin with blocking. I know that there are directors that begin with, I don't know, fill in the blank of the thing that you could do instead of table work. But I feel that opportunity to have those conversations around the table also means that everybody in the room also has their arrows pointed in the same direction. That we're not in conflict about what's happening here, that nobody's coming to a particular scene with an entirely different agenda or orientation. Because really, it's the filling in of the life of the character and filling in the life of the play and filling in the edges beyond the frame of the play that helps to inform the choices that you can make once you're actually playing a scene. And for me as a playwright, especially with a new play, the danger is setting things in stone too quickly before you've had an opportunity to make those discoveries. So yeah, I think it's good for everybody. It's helpful. It's illuminating, and it's also been, as we discovered after this week, having done a lot of table work, and then we did another read of the entire play, the way that things deepened and were clarified, and the surprising choices that actors were able to make because of the value of the several days of table work that had preceded that read.
Because usually what we'll do analysis, and kind of go through the story, but we don't always in my experience, I haven't always had the benefit of having the playwright on hand. Sure. Even in projects that I've done where the playwright is involved, usually the playwright's in another rehearsal for a play that they're in or they're directing, so we never really get to have that opportunity until we kind of get to maybe tech rehearsal or something like that, and the playwright's available. So, what happened? Obviously, I'm assuming that everybody's still going to have scripts in hand tonight when you get there, and then where will your involvement be at that point?
If I had the opportunity, I would just stay here and be
in
every rehearsal, but I can't. So I need to go back to St. Paul, but I will still zoom into rehearsals because I will want to see how things are happening once things are on their feet. From my perspective as a playwright, you can't always know if the scene is working until you can see bodies in space. So in a new play, that play can be continuing to be revised, reshaped, refined until and through previews.
Sure. Yeah.
There's probably some apocryphal tale of, some play, just before opening night, and then we cut a character and we added 3 more, and, and everybody had to rememorize the script. And that happens because, frankly, with a new play, you can't actually know how it's all going to come together until it all comes together. Because I've been working on this play for a couple of years, and I've had the opportunity to do different development weeks with different directors, dramaturgs, casts. There's a lot of things about the play that I'm feeling very confident about, and other things it's like, well, guess what? I won't know everything until I know it. So
going through those renditions or those opportunities or workshops or whatnot, were there ever times where you just thought, I can't do this. This isn't working?
I've been fortunate with this play and this, all of the processes that I've gone through, that I never had those moments. There have been times when people have asked me difficult questions that I didn't actually know how I was going to answer. I didn't know what the best answer was. And some of that is time and distance.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Someone can ask a question of you in March of 2022, and you won't know the answer to it until September 2023. That after it's been, spinning in your brain, you're like, oh, right, that's the answer. I finally figured it out. I'll be honest, there have been other development processes that haven't been always so fruitful, or it's been harder to navigate those questions, in part because where the stressors are coming from, right? Sometimes it's like, well, why did you choose this play? I'm not sure if why you chose this play if you seem to not like almost everything about it. And it can be very frustrating because it's like, is it that you genuinely don't like this version of the play, or is it that you think it's your job to be mean to me, right? Dramaturg, director, whatever, producer to playwright. As playwrights, we always hear those horror stories of people who say, well, I know how you're going to have to change your ending, or I know you don't need that character, and it's a little bit insulting to have somebody come to you from the outside and say, yeah, there's your problem right there. That's the thing you need to cut. Occasionally, there's a nugget of truth in what they're saying, but the answer may not be cutting that character or cutting that scene. It's just they're responding to something else that they maybe, for lack of a better phrase, can't quite articulate. And so their answer is this, fix this, do this. And in the theater world, we often find producers or directors who seem to feel that it's their job to direct the changes. And that can be very frustrating, especially if it's something in the play that you're like, I know we're not having the same conversation.
Right.
And I can't figure out how to get you to hear me better or to hear you better, which is why it's great when there's a dramaturg in the room who can say, I think the thing we're actually talking about is that. You're saying it's the character's sweater, but it's not the character's sweater, it's this other thing. And then reframing the question sort of helps to lift the load of what we're in conflict about, ideally.
How have you always come out vindicated on the other end in those instances? Or does it come to a compromise where it's like, okay, let's revisit this together and see what we can come up with?
Not always. I'll admit that there have been times when somebody else has said, I really think that XYZ needs to happen in this play. And my initial response was, hell no, not going to happen. I'm not changing that. And then, 3-4 months later, I realize, oh my God, no, that was genius. That was brilliant. I don't know why I was so defensive about it, but
because we're protective of our work.
We are protective of our work. It's very personal, and it can be very painful when somebody says, you don't need that character. You don't need that blah, blah, blah. Because it especially if it comes off as dismissive or
Sure. There's a phrasing.
Yeah, there's a phrasing to it. There's an attitude to it. So, I mean, even with this play, in a previous iteration of this play, this was a 5-actor play. Mm-hmm. And after a recent festival, a note had come from more of a producing mind person saying, does it have to be 5 actors? Could it be 4 actors? And I knew that part of that was, there's a monetary consideration. Sure. Actors are expensive, and they're also glorious, but they're expensive. And so my initial reaction was, it's always been 5. 5 feels more balanced than 4. I don't want to talk about that. And then I realized that's actually a really good suggestion. And I was able to find a real truth in the storytelling about having it be 4 actors. I will give nothing away for those of you who are coming to the play, but that it has made it a better play. And I had to get over my own damn self to hear that note, but then find a way to answer it that was truthful to the play.
Well, let me ask you this then. So you get rid of a character. Now, did you find similarities in other characters where you could kind of disperse their view, that the character you eliminated to disperse their views into 2 other characters to make it, or did you just eliminate that person altogether and then just rewrite it between the 4?
Fortunately, in this play, it was not so much eliminating a character, it was about how we did the doubling. There's 2 actors who play 2 people throughout, and then there are 2 actors who are choral characters who play a plethora of other people. So it was really about distribution of those characters within these 2 actors' bodies, but also how to approach that doubling in a way. Is
this a farce?
It is not.
When you said that, the only thing I could think of is the 39 steps.
Right, yes.
That's what it reminded me of. So
it's not a farce, but it is funny. How about that?
I'll take that. How long? Because I'm as we've been talking, I've noticed that you say after a little while I realized how brilliant that was. How much time do you let pass before you revisit a draft? When you get through the first pass, do you go right back into it, or do you say I'm going to let this simmer for a little bit right here and I'll revisit it in like a week or a month or 6 months?
It really depends. Like when you're in the middle of a development process, sometimes it's as simple as I need to go for a walk.
Sure.
Right? Okay, I just need to stand up from my desk, go have a cup of coffee, and then come back. But when it's a longer development process, sometimes it's just, well, great. We had that week of development, and now I'm going home, and that play is just going to sit on my desk while I do another project. And then later you come back to it in another development workshop, in another reading, etc. Or in the middle of the night, you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I know how to fix that scene now. So it really depends. But I find that there's a thing that can happen when you're working on a play in whatever process you are, that you can feel like your whole body clenching on the answer, right? And I don't necessarily subscribe to a lot of est kind of woo-woo kind of stuff. Although I do remember from one workshop, this guy saying, try to pick up that book. And the woman picked it up. And he said, no, you just picked it up. I said, try to pick up the book. And there's this idea of doing something effortfully, right? It's like you're clenching and you're not really doing it. You're just trying. And sometimes it's like you need to walk away from that. You're gonna break something if you're approaching the work with that level of frustration and anxiety and upset. Just walk away, shake it off, take a breath, get clear, maybe have a nap. Do you know what I mean? So that you can come back with a clearer head, and that you're not. I sometimes liken playwriting and revision process to a giant Jenga tower. And sometimes you're a little afraid, like, what happens when I pull out this brick? Is the whole tower going to fall down? And if you can get over it and realize you're not going to break anything, especially if you save as, right? But you have to be brave enough to make those trials as long as you're relaxed. And my daughter likes to say, this is a military expression apparently, slow makes smooth and smooth makes fast. And I like to think about that in the creative process.
Sure.
You can't write in a rush, and you can't rush. Writing under deadline can sometimes work because it's sometimes exhilarating that it's like, yes, we're going to make that deadline.
Right.
But sometimes bad decisions could get made because you're frantic and hurrying, and then you fall and spill the actual beans. Do you know what I mean? So
100%. And I'm right there with you. I'm glad that you said the save as, because I think it's a wonderful tool. Because I'll go through things like that where I'll make changes, but I always do the versions.
yes.
I have like 1.2, 1 point, and eventually I'll go to 2 point, whatever. And I find that very helpful as well.
Yeah, just this week, there was a scene that I've been trying to crack the nut of that scene, and finally, I saved the draft as, and I saved it as, the name of just the scene I was reworking.
Sure.
And I named it something like, messy draft for XYZ, so that I could just allow myself to fuck it up,
Sure.
And then in that process, I actually found I had the freedom to explore, and I was able to solve that problem. But there was, I don't remember the name of this fiction writer, but I was hearing her speak at some banquet or something, and she said that when she starts to write, and she was very old school, she always writes on, everybody's process is different. I shouldn't, label it so negatively, but she writes on, her first draft is always by hand on a legal pad, and at the top of the legal pad, she always writes, "Now you have permission to write badly." And then she begins. And I tell my students the same thing. It's like, you have to give yourself permission to not know all the answers and to do something that, don't judge yourself. You cannot edit and write at the same time. You cannot be judging yourself as you're writing, or it's going to be really tense and unpleasant, and you won't have the freedom to make the great discoveries that you want to be making. So
You were talking about development processes, and is there one that you find easier or more beneficial to, whether that's I'm going to sit down and write the whole thing right off the bat. I'm going to go to a workshop and I'm going to write 10 pages bring 10 pages at a time until I'm done. What is there one that you find that works best for you, or that you find is more successful?
I have learned that I have to have the freedom to write the first draft as messily as I can. A couple of years ago, I was experiencing just incredible writer's block. And I know there are some people who say they don't believe in writer's block. I do. I've experienced it. And whatever it is that's going on emotionally, psychologically, physically with you, you're just not able to get back to the page. You're stopping yourself from creating. But there was a play I wanted to write, and there was a deadline coming up. And I said to myself, I said aloud in my living room, Jesus, just fucking write it. And I sat down, and I was doing the same thing where I was saving as a lot. And I just made myself keep going. It's like, maybe this is it. And I might even label the scene. Maybe next, ? And I just kept going until I've reached what I knew was going to be the end of the play. And in 6 days, I had written 120 pages.
Wow. It's a good place to be.
It's a really good place to be, but I had to get out of my own way to just dump out that draft. Now, that was not a perfect draft by any stretch of the imagination. There were lots of messes in it, but I had it then. And then I could go back in. Writing is hard, rewriting is easier, in my opinion.
Sure.
And so then I was at a place where I could actually look at it and say, oh, well, that was dumb, or that doesn't work, or I don't think I need that scene. But until it was on the page, I couldn't have known any of those things.
Right.
Ideally, there are several really good play development opportunities around the country to go and help yourself work on your play. And they're best designed when they're asking the question, what does the playwright need right now to work on their play? And it might be that this is a playwright who just needs a space to work and space to rewrite, and maybe have 12 actors at the end of the week to hear it. Or maybe this is a playwright who's farther along in their process, and so they need several days in a room with actors, like the table work I was discussing, right? Or maybe it's a play that is at the place where, no, you need to see it staged. You need to see bodies moving in space in order to understand how your play is actually working. So, I mean, again, ideally that development process should be offering something for you as a playwright that you wouldn't otherwise have discovered, but not without the stress of production. Or without the stress of some other force outside saying, but we know how you should fix your play. Only you know really how the play needs to live. In the best of all possible worlds, you have a team of people who understand your play and understand you and can help you make those discoveries. But really, sometimes it's like, no, go to a place up in the, mountains and write, and then you will, you will come to some nirvana about your own play. So, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Well, I found I need to force myself when I get into a better place to I need to find a weekend a month to get the heck out of Dodge, and force myself to go somewhere else without the distractions. And
absolutely, yeah. The other thing is, we're all really good at tricking ourselves into or sabotaging ourselves, right? It's like, oh, I'm far too busy to write. But if I say to myself, how about you just write for 15 minutes?
Sure.
Just that's all you need, just 15 minutes. And then I can trick myself into actually getting work done because I'm not sabotaging myself before I have even a chance. But I love the idea of like just getting out of your own normal, your house, your normal schedule, etc. Because, my issue is I'll be writing and I'll be like, wow, someone should really wash those dishes. Oh, I guess it's me. Or this room is very messy. I can't possibly write until everything has been cleaned. It's like, well, that was silly, but,
That's what I tell when I do a writer's workshop at a high school theater festival. That's one of the things I touch on is the resistance and the fact that we'll do chores. We'll actually do chores before we will sit down and write. And it's going back to the not having enough time. I don't have time for that. I want to say it was an episode, but somebody put it in a good perspective. It's like, you have time. It's not a priority. Because I guarantee you, if a pipe bursts and there's a flood in your kitchen, you're going to make time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. You brought up your students. What are some of the, are you teaching? I should ask this question do you teach playwriting in your creative writing classes?
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the, and I hate this, I bring this up every once in a while for professors that are teaching, and I always say the mistakes. And that's not the right word, because I don't think they're necessarily mistakes. They're just...
What do I see my students doing that I wish they weren't doing?
Yeah, right off the bat when they come in.
Well, because I teach high school, and I teach at the Orange County High School of the Arts, which is a performing arts high school, and so I have very serious, smart, playful students who are teenagers and therefore think they know everything and already think they know what they're doing as writers. Yeah. And in our program, we make them take different genre classes so that they don't come into the program saying, no, I'm a very serious poet and I don't do anything else. And it's like, sir, you're 14. You don't know anything about anything. So I will get students who not only have never written a play, they maybe have never seen a play, or if they have, they saw Matilda, or they saw they saw The Lion King.
Right. Something big.
But they haven't necessarily they don't necessarily know a whole lot about how a play is made and how plays are different from musicals and all those things. And so my first goal is just to bring it down to the things that they know. For example, character. They all know how to create character, or they think they do. And so I can build on that. Or they've watched a lot of television. And so my goal is to say, guess what? We're not writing that. No, we're not writing TV. You can't have a scene in, well, you could. I mean, it's like helping them to understand how things work on stage. And if they, for example, have a scene that describes this, I see this a lot. Mother and son driving down the street, having a conversation, and they stop at a stoplight and the son gets out of the car and they continue to have a conversation while they're walking around the car, etc. And it's like, how is that going to happen on stage? And they're like, oh, right. Because they were seeing it in their head like a film or like a TV show. And just helping them to understand that there are other practicalities. And it's like, I'm not telling you can't have a scene in a car.
100%,
I'm saying, how are you describing that? Because the way you're writing it, you're telling me this has to be a realistic car that is moving in space.
Right, yeah.
And unless you have $1 bajillion in your budget, that's not happening in a theater. So anyway, but then also it's getting them to slow down.
Sure.
Because I will see young playwrights go from, 0 to 60 in 2 pages. And it's like, wow, that happened real fast. Can we just slow down and think about how humans navigate these different problems, crises, etc.? So in a way, it's almost like, it's not like I'm tricking them into writing. It's just saying, we're going to work on a different thing today. We don't even need to finish it. But today we're talking about subtext. Today we're talking about conventions of the theater or whatever it happens to be. So ideally, they're having a good time. They're exploring things, and I never judge them based on whether or not they finish something. It's like, did you try something, and were you brave enough to do something ridiculous and potentially ludicrous? Were you brave enough to fail? I love that. Please do that for me. So the more I can convince them that I'm really asking for that, the more risks they'll take as young writers.
How do you when you're teaching subtext, how do you do that? How do you teach subtext?
Well, I have a couple of different exercises, and part of it is we have a lot of group think kind of, writing on the board. It's like, so for example, you have a crush on somebody, but you can't just walk up to them and say, I think you're really cool. And then we, as a class, will just be like, oh, maybe they would say, oh, I like your shirt, or, oh, you dropped this. You know what I mean? And so just having those fun activities of realizing, right, we have subtext all day, every day in our lives.
Yeah.
And so then, having them read somebody else, read an example and say, okay, where's the subtext in this scene? What is the subtext? When this character says, maybe we could do this again, what's the subtext there? Or, oh gosh, look, it's already 1:00. I should be going. Is there any what's going underneath that? So for them to see it, recognize it on the page, and then start to see it in their own plays, it's a lot of different ways of talking about the same potential point of the exercise. So yeah. How did I get there? How did you grow as a playwright and overcome your obstacles? What were the flaws that you were experiencing in your writing how did you learn to recognize them, and how did you learn to fix them, or what was it that, Well, first, I came to playwriting later. I was a poet. I was an actor. I was an actor and a poet sort of at the same time. Anyway, I won't go through my whole life story, but just to say that I didn't actually start writing plays, and really didn't start writing plays seriously until much later. So when people say, wait, you're how old? And it's like, Look, y'all, I did not go to Juilliard. I did not go to Yale. I did not start writing plays when I was 25. So back off.
Let's knock that out of the arena for right now. That there's no age restriction on when you can enter into anything artistic.
Exactly. So, so I had the brilliant education of being an actor and experiencing a play from the inside. I stage managed, I acted, I sewed costumes, I made props. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So I knew the theater from a lot of different angles. So that when I started writing, I had already read a bajillion plays and I had already worked on a bajillion. And so to a certain extent, I had already gotten a lot of practical education in the inner workings of a play. As a writer, I was first a poet, so I had the love of language, and those two things merging was a great entry point for me as a playwright. I did a lot of, I took some classes. I did workshops with, here in Los Angeles, you'll have, you can sign up for like a 10, 15-week thing where you bring 10 pages every week, etc. And just going back to those basics of, right, how does this scene work? Looking at other people working on their own scenes and seeing something in somebody else's process that was informative. For me, it was really about, just those incremental steps of finding more confidence in my storytelling, giving myself the opportunity to find my voice so that I wasn't writing these derivative plays, these are, plays and playwrights that I love, but not trying to write a Marcia Norman, not trying to write a Sam Shepard, not trying to write, do you know what I mean?
I do, but and how do you, I guess, how does one find their voice? And what is a voice? What is a voice, and how do you find it?
I think it's about recognizing the stories that matter to you, first and foremost. The stories and people and places that you value. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I am probably unlikely to write a play that takes place in Manhattan walk-up. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't value plays that do that, but that's not my life and who I am. I'm also unlikely to write, there are certain stories that I have no business telling, but I know the stories that matter to me. And if I can be clear and truthful about that, why I'm writing those, why they matter, why they keep me up at night, then that's one step towards finding your voice. But also it's about, I think, being true to what you find fascinating, humorous, the things that you love, the language that drives you. That's where you start to find your voice. Coming to terms with what you think good theater is, right? There's an exercise that I have my students do, and it comes from Mac Wellman, who is one of the language poets. And he asks everybody to think about, or asks his students to think about the worst plays they've ever seen. What would be the worst things they could see on stage? And then he encourages them to write from that perspective in their bad play. To
intentionally write a bad play?
Yeah. But I think then that also conversely means you have to be thinking about, what does it mean for you to do theater rather than anything else? What do those stories look like on stage? What makes it theatrical? What's the vocabulary of theater that matters to you? Which is one reason why I don't write musicals, because that's not part of my vocabulary. I don't,
What are other besides me? What are other words in the vocabulary of theater that just so I can really unpack this to where our listeners really kind of know exactly.
Well, it's about what makes a play exciting and visceral and not TV. Right. The opportunity for magic, the opportunity for mystery, the opportunity for the audience to be discovering the play as you're discovering the play, to understand the landscape of this theatrical world. That I love plays that do something unexpected, in which there is mystery, in which there is the highly theatrical language that could be borrowed from dance or art or puppetry, etc. Right? That we've got a lot that we can do simply to really elevate the experience beyond simply a conversational, realistic story that could easily have just been filmed on TV, right? It's like, where is the mystery and majesty that can take place on stage? And also just the farcical. So it's all of those questions. It's like your voice as a playwright is as much about how you write and the kinds of language you use, as well as what is your theatrical language that you're leaning into, and what do you value in terms of storytelling and how that happens on stage.
How has poetry, since that's where you started, how has that helped as where does poetry fall into playwriting, and how did poetry help you with your playwriting?
Initially, honestly, I felt that at first I kind of left poetry behind, mostly because it was that I hadn't quite figured out how to where that lived in a play, right? Ultimately, now I've realized that part of it is, one, the playfulness of language, and two, finding those registers that move beyond the everyday, the conversational, and finding those places in which we maybe open up into a more dreamlike space, that I realized I have the training, I have the vocabulary to do that, right? And in this play, there's actually literal poetry. That one of the characters is a poet, and I got to write the poetry for her, which was such a joy to go back to that thing that I really do love. But to say there's only one kind of poetry, sort of like Frank O'Hara used to say, I'm a real poet. I write in prose. And so I find that now that I've been writing more, I realize, I'm practicing my craft as a poet every time I encounter a line. It's like, I was just doing this last night, looking at, there's lots of lists in the play. People talk in lists every once in a while, even if it's like 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's like, that list is in the wrong order. It's literally 5 simple words, but it's like, it also doesn't sound in the right order, and it's not making the same impact. It's not going from least bad to worst bad, right? I need to rejigger that. And those tiny little choices, those little surgical maneuvers that I'm making are as much about the joy and possibility of language as it is just like the practicality of, I need to make this easier for the actor to say. So
how, with somebody with a playwright that may not have a background in poetry, how can they learn to what can they do to apply? And I'm not talking about poetry in like, my character is a poet, and so they talk in poetry. But how can they find ways to implement poetry throughout their playwright without having that background? I mean, is it enough to go pick up a book and read, or take a class, or like just?
I think honestly, I think people should read as much of different kinds of things as possible, right? Okay. Read history, read books about history, read older shit, read some new poems, study lyrics. I mean, it's just like, it's all around you. And if you would get out of your comfort zone, right? Get out of your regular lane and read something that might surprise you a little. I think that's how we expand our vocabulary. Learn a new language. That's another way, right? That I think that we sell ourselves short when you're like, this is how I write and I don't do anything else. So it's like, well, why? There are too many possible choices. It's like coming to a restaurant that serves just, all wonderful meals and you eat the same thing every time you go.
You
right?
have your Cheesecake Factory with your big old menu. All right, fair enough. Okay. And then, all right, then on that note, what was the catalyst to launch you into playwriting then? At a quote unquote late age, if you will.
Right. No, that's fair. It is. I am a woman of a certain age, and anyway, here's how it went down. I had gone to school as an actor. I was encouraged to be a poet by some famous poets who shall remain nameless. And I went and got my MFA. Even while I was getting my MFA as a poet, I was still acting in shows. Okay. I did Fei-Fu and her Friends. I was Julia in Fei-Fu. I was Portia in Merchant of Venice. Hello, Larry Biederman. Thank you. And then, we had a baby and I needed to make some money and I worked as a technical writer.
What's a technical writer?
A technical writer is somebody who either writes manuals, those awful but this was back in the day when the internet in its glory didn't really totally exist. But also things like, white papers and other technical things that, you're the massager of more technical language. It was a good gig while I had it. But then once we got to Columbus, Ohio, I was approached by a colleague of my husband's. My husband is also in the theater. And she said, I'm part of this multidisciplinary theater company. We have actors, dancers, musicians, painters, but we don't really have any writers right now. And would you be interested in joining us doing some performance poetry kind of stuff? So I did that. But as I was doing these very experimental, interesting performance poetry things with dance and music and, whatever, I realized that I was sort of veering into, I don't know, narrative and writing in dialogue. And it's like, right. And this feels utterly natural and familiar. And I started writing short plays and then I wrote a couple of longer plays. And then it just felt true to be doing that. So that's really how it happened. And then I decided, well, it was sort of like when I turned 40, it was like, this is my promise to myself. I've turned 40. I'm not going to be depressed about that. I'm going to say, this is my opportunity to really invest in myself as an artist. And so just kept going. So, how much did you have in your not wheelhouse? Maybe wheelhouse isn't the right word, but how much did you have before you decided to start? I'm going to start sending it out. I'm going to start attempting to get it out there. What was that process, and what was your experience through there as far as like acceptance, rejection, success? Right.
How did that go?
Well, because I had been in the poetry world, which is brutal and difficult, and I had been through so much rejection already that it just felt like second nature. And I tried to be really intentional about who I was applying to and why, right? So, for example, I had these, new plays that I knew weren't done. So I was applying to reading festivals and, things like that. And every time I would meet somebody, then I would discover about a new place to send work to. There's one really good development conference, Seven Devils Theater Conference. It happens every summer in the wilds of Idaho. Don't be afraid. It's really great. And I had heard great things about it. And so I sent. And the first year I got rejected. And I sent again. I applied again.
Same play or different?
Different play.
Okay.
But the second time I got rejected, I had a little hand. This was back when they used to like put the rejections in an envelope and mail them to you. And there was a little handwritten note at the bottom saying, please apply again. And I put that letter up on my bulletin board. It was like,
good for you.
Nobody is required to write handwritten notes on the bottom of rejection notes.
Sure.
So I took it seriously, and I did again. And the next rejection was even longer. Like, we really loved this play. We're sorry we didn't have room for it, or something along those lines. Right. So I was like, okay,
I'm on the right track.
I'm on the right track. So I kept trying. And then, my play 10 Mile Lake was selected for development there. And it felt finally like I had really achieved something. But it was also that it felt like, it wasn't like I was beating my head against a wall. I was listening to the signals being given to me. So that's one way that I sort of carved out these opportunities for myself and tried to find the best possible venues. I know that there are playwrights that out of desperation will send their play to as many different places as possible. And it's like, my friend, did you read the mission statement of the theater?
Sure.
They're never going to do a 25-person history play because they have a tiny little space. And did you see their previous season? None of their plays are more than 3 characters. Right. So be a little bit more thoughtful and intentional. Don't waste other people's time
100%.
with plays that they're never going to do. But it's also about meeting people. It's about talking to people. It's about making those connections. And it's not like the sleazy, slightly icky sounding networking, but it really is about who's out there. What are they doing? What are they interested in? How can you be a good citizen in that theatrical world? Be interested. Go to plays. Go to lots of plays.
Sure.
Do
you think that it's coming from a place where they didn't read the mission statement, or do you think it's just like, well, my play's good enough to where even if it doesn't fit in this, I'm going to send it because maybe they'll say yes?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think sometimes people, like, there will be the worst offenders, like the guy, in this case it will be a guy who's submitting his play to a women's theater festival because this is a play with all women. And it's like, my friend, what kind of audacity is that? This is a festival for women's work. Why are you being such a punk, right?
Right.
And but then sometimes it's also, well, I need to send it as far and wide as possible because I don't know who will like it. And it's like, well, that's kind of the issue, my friend. You didn't know who would like it because maybe you didn't bother to actually find out who out there is doing what.
Right, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
how long was this conference, and what did you walk away with? What'd you learn? How did they improve your writing? How did they develop your play?
Well, the conference itself is 2 weeks long. You have each playwright gets 27 hours ish with actors, director, dramaturg, extra time to write, opportunities to see other people working on their plays. And what was really wonderful for me was realizing that I had the freedom to rewrite as much as I wanted to. Yes, it was going to be on its feet and it was going to be staged, but I could literally bring in new pages like 15 minutes before the reading on Friday night happened, right?
Oh, okay.
So it was a real sense of freedom. And at first I was a little bit like a deer in the headlights about it all. Like all of the attention being on the play and on me felt a little at first like I just would freeze up. But then when I realized, oh, right, they're all focused on this because they all legitimately, that's what they're here to work on. This is the whole point. And so after I got over my initial freak out about all of that, I found that it was possible for me to just really experiment and listen to the actors and really listen to what was going on in the room. And it was really magical for me that I was able to have that opportunity to see how a scene was working, but also conversely to see exactly why it wasn't and where I needed to cut and how I needed to reframe it. So it was glorious. And I learned a lot of really good lessons in that week that I was able to apply to other work on my own. Like asking myself the important and difficult questions about my own play that ideally a dramaturg will ask, or a director will ask, or the actors around the table will ask. And you just learn those muscles after, play after play after play. You're able to be your own best dramaturg, right? You're able to do that work for yourself if you're being honest about it, I think.
Sure. How costly? I mean, you have to get in first, and once you get your play accepted, how costly is it at that point? What are the fees that go into?
Well, ideally, there's no fees to you. Here's the thing: I know that there are places that will charge a very small fee, and that money goes to pay readers, and I think that that's totally fair and appropriate. But then, like Seven Devils, I didn't have to pay anything to go there.
Okay.
Right? They flew me there.
Oh, wow.
They paid me a stipend. They gave me a place to stay. Right?
So where do they get their funding for that if they're just giving this away for free?
Well, they have a development committee. And, it's like any theater company. You do fundraisers. You get, sponsors. But no playwright should be... I know there are these opportunities like the pay-to-play kind of thing.
Sure.
Where you go to a festival and you have to give them $300 and you have to bring in your own cast and director, et cetera, right?
Right.
Those exist, and that might serve a really good purpose. But if we're behaving professionally, then these kinds of opportunities you should not have to pay to do things like that.
But I'm glad that you brought up the reader part because there was a festival I was running for a little while. It's on hold for right now since COVID shut everything down. I'd like to get back to it, and I go back and forth. This has come up a few times about like, oh well, you shouldn't try to make your money off the backs of writers, or it's. I can respect that, but I think there's a small price to pay. And I always do this with the playwrights that I'm working with the workshop. It's like you have to first of all, you got to choose wisely which festival or which competition you're going to join. And this is what I don't understand either. Is like there's screenwriting competitions out there. They charge $65, but nobody has a problem paying for those. And and you might get an award, or you might get a. When I say award, I'm talking about like maybe a certificate that says you won.
Hooray!
Yeah, and you may get some money. Mm-hmm. To me, as far as screenwriting goes, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. When I talk to my playwrights, what would you rather have? And this is what I think the important thing is: avoid the competitions that give you a monetary reward, or a monetary award, because and that's it, because. All you're doing is getting a portion of the pot,
right?
Now and then I'll propose to them: would you rather have the $500, or would you rather have a 2-week run of your play? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think that's where the money comes into play, where it's like, look, there's somebody else is going to put up their money to stage your play, so $10, $15, $20 is a small price to pay if you get a 2-week run out of it. And
right. I think it really does depend on what's the monetary amount that you're dishing out, and 2, what is it really for? For example, I know maybe there are not so many of these anymore because I don't apply to them anymore, but the 10-minute festivals, festivals of 10-minute plays. I think a 10-minute play is a wonderful thing, and I've written a lot of them, and blah, blah, blah. But I am not going to pay $20 reader fee for a play, for a 10-minute play, if I'm not getting even if it's like, yes, but for the play that you're selected, we'll give you a $50, royalty. And it's like, oh, honey, but for a 10-minute play, that's $2 a page.
Sure.
I find that astonishing that anyone would do that. Again, when I'm sending my play out to development opportunities, I always have to ask myself, what is the money going toward? If the money is going to a pot for a prize, I'm not doing that.
Sure.
If the money is going to pay readers, I will gladly pay that.
Okay.
Because I've been that reader and I know how hard that work is. So, but that's just my choice. And some playwrights are adamantly opposed to paying anything for anything, which is okay. I mean, look, it's a free country. You can do that.
Sure, 100%.
But, and the rationale is always, actors don't pay to audition. Why should I pay to audition my material? And it's like, fair, except we are talking about slightly different things. Actors, when actors audition, they might be there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, maybe, right? And but if you're sending a full-length play in, somebody's got to read it.
Yeah.
That takes time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But it also goes back to, as well, it's like, who are you?
Who are you? Exactly.
You've got to start somewhere. And if you need to get your work out there, sometimes that does, come with a price, That's where I'm at. And, you have to build that resume. And it's like, yeah, true. Actors don't pay to audition, but I can point to plenty of actors that will do a 2, 3, 4 week production and not get paid because because of the love of it. Or
they will pay for a 4-week class, right? Yeah. And I think that I have paid for classes, right, to go and work on material, right? It's both. It's both and. I'm both taking a class and I'm working on my play at the same time. I did that at the beginning, and then I did that for several years, and then I realized, I don't need to pay anybody to take this class. I've learned that. I've learned those things. Now I'm done with those things, but I might pay for a special workshop with somebody more famous. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think you really have to be mindful about what are you getting out of this, and where are you? What stage are you at in your own career? But you also have to, it's like watching out for the scams, right? Sure.
Where do you find your opportunities now?
Honestly, I'm a member of the Playwright Center. I look at their opportunities. I look at who's asking for scripts, but also I'm now fortunately at my stage in my career when sometimes the opportunities literally come to me. Like someone will contact me and say, "Can I send your script to so-and-so?" And that's really awesome and wonderful. But then there might also be, I try to make relationships with directors. I continue to do my homework about, all right, who's doing work that feels in my lane? How can I reach out to them? How can I have my agent reach out to them? And so it's a lot of different ways of encountering the opportunities that are out there. And then there are still some of the same, it's like I would still love to go to the O'Neill. I would still love to, fill in the blank place that I would love to be a part of that development opportunity. But I'm also sometimes, at this stage in my life, I'm like a little bit more jealous, like 2 weeks there or 2 weeks with my dog camping. Maybe I just want to go camping with my dog. Do you know what I mean?
And you can still write.
And I can still write.
How'd you land your agent?
That happened because of a premiere of one of my plays at a Lort B. It's the Denver Center. My play, The 2 Degrees, premiered at the Denver Center. And that's how I started my relationship with my agent.
Okay.
It was really wonderful. Susan Gurman. Thank you, Susan.
Nice.
So that's how we met. And that's, she's been my agent ever since.
And how'd you land at the Denver
Center? Yeah. I am entirely thankful for the kindness of strangers. What's that line? No,
yes, I rely on the kindness of strangers. Something like that.
Yeah. So it wasn't a stranger; it was a friend of mine. I had been workshopping plays at Seven Devils, and I had met this director, Christy Montour Larson, who we learned we had been young and dumb and in a summer rep festival when we were
that's awesome
1920, and we hadn't seen each other since then. She and I stayed in contact, and she had read this play. And she said, can I bring this to Kent Thompson and the literary manager at, I was like, you can do whatever you want with, and she did. And then it was part of the New Play Summit. We did that was the workshop and reading there. And then they chose it for their upcoming season. So, and that's what I mean about, finding relationships with people, because you don't know who's going to really connect with your work. Right. And you have those long time, ideally you'll have long time relationships with people who will be absolutely stewards and cheerleaders of your work. So the fact that Christy brought this script to them, it wouldn't have happened without Christy. And then, there's a subsequent production happened because I had met this young director who started a theater company in St. Louis, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, can I read that play? And I was like, absolutely. So, you just don't know who's going to become important to you later on in your life, which is why, the no assholes rule about the theater, you should really be thinking, am I the asshole in the room? People in the room, you don't know how they're going to be important to you or what kinds of long-term relationships you're going to start to forge. And that it's not just about, hey, you don't know who's going to do you a favor later, but come on, these people might be people you want to work with for a long time. Yeah. So
I think there's a good handful when I was doing play noir, it's all film noir style one-act plays. I think I don't think I really held auditions. I think a couple times I might have, but it was like, hey, are you coming back this year? You coming back? And there's other ones where I didn't bother to ask you because I don't want to work with you ever again.
Yes. Do not need to share a screen space with you ever again. Yeah.
Where can people find your work?
Well, the best place to find my work is on NPX. Yes, this is a plug for NPX. That's the National Play Exchange. It doesn't cost much at all to have your work up on there.
$25 a year depending on what you are. I think it's even cheaper for playwrights.
Exactly. So you can find all of my plays complete and unabridged there. And I've got 2 plays that are now published. My play Age of Bees is published through Original Works Publishing, and my play 2 Degrees is now published through TRW Plays. So there you go. More plugs. Okay. Or you can go to my website and find me and send me an email. I'm easy to find.
And what's that website?
TiraPalmquist.com, which has to be updated. I know. When you go there and you realize that The Body's Midnight isn't on there, I'm sorry. I have to do some website maintenance. Okay.
Right there with you. And then right alongside with the website, are you on the socials?
I am. I have stopped being on Twitter because the man who shall remain nameless who ruined it. But I am on Instagram at tira.p, and I'm on Facebook. And again, I'm pretty easily findable.
Sure. All right. Well, Tira Palmquist, thank you for coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you so much, James. It was really fun to talk with you.
I'm glad we finally got this to work after an adventurous day.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with your friends. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.